I'm always looking for cooler ways to display character models than just setting them on a shelf. Something that really tells a story. And one way to do that is by capturing and integrating elements of the world that they come from. You might be surprised where you'll find some of those elements. There were some unexpected wins and losses in this video, and I hope you enjoy. I've increasingly enjoyed putting together Gunpla, and one that I've been really excited for is this one. This is a Gundam Base exclusive. Gundam Bases can only be found across oceans from me, so needless to say, I don't get to them very often. A couple months ago, the Gundam Base came to me. Well, technically it came to Aurora, but that's near me, so you get the point. I wasn't looking for this set specifically, but I guess this set was specifically looking for me. Not even sure what that's supposed to mean, but I spent 2 hours waiting in line to get into the trailer. I felt like I would have wasted those 2 hours had I not purchased anything. And this is the set that stood out to me. I recently picked up this organizer because I found that with these kits with lots of sprues, I waste a lot of time searching for the correct runner. Unfortunately, all the runners had little tabs or bumps that prevented them from slotting into place on this one. Maybe it's just the combination of these sprue trees and the organizer, but I didn't get much use out of it. If you have recommendations for better ones, let me know in the comments. If you've never tried Gunpla personally before, it's honestly a great relaxing hobby. I would recommend trying it out to almost anyone. There's a wide variety of difficulty levels, so you can dive in at entry grade and work all the way up to something like perfect grade unleashed. But because they're all snap fit, you really just need a good pair of nippers and the kit. So the barrier to entry is quite low. Also, the smaller sets are very affordable. If you've tried scale modeling before and you haven't liked using the glue and the paint and all the additional steps, but you still want to build small things, I would suggest Gunpla. As a Lego guy my whole life, when I got into Gunpla, it naturally fell in the same category of enjoyment. Now, if you are into the glue and all the other stuff, you can absolutely go crazy with Gunpla as well. It's actually one of my favorite types of content to watch on YouTube. It inspired me to build this thing today. That being said, one of my favorite things to watch within that sphere of content is the finishing and repainting of kits, which I did not do in this video because this kit is specifically sold as an exclusive silver finish variation of the Freedom Gundam. I probably would have taken the time to repaint it otherwise. Because it does have all that nice reflective silver coating on so much of it, I decided that it would be fun to highlight that quality by building some cool lighting into the base itself. You'll see more about that in a little bit. One of the bummers about the silver coating is that if you go to scrape off sprue marks or mold lines with an X-Acto, you'll probably scrape off the coating as well, which reveals the not so nice looking plastic underneath. One of those metallic silver markers specifically for Gunpla would probably have done the trick, but I didn't have one on hand, so I was very delicate about my scraping and finishing. One thing I found about building things that come in pairs is that it goes a lot quicker if you do each step twice while you're at it, rather than going back and doing it front to back. Although I'm not actually sure if that is faster, because the second time you go through, you'll know what you're doing, and it might speed up the process. If you have experience with that, and you know which one is faster, let me know in the comments. What you see me holding right here, at the end you'll see folded up, and it looks like the sides of a skirt, but it's not. It's actually 2 foldable railguns that are waist mounted for a nice powerful shot from the hip. This is my first time putting together any Gundam that have wings, and let's just say from a display perspective, having the wings on the back takes this Freedom Gundam from a level 7 to a level 11 on the intimidation scale. After assembling the wings, made out of lots of little blades, after seeing them all side by side, I couldn't help but think that this wing pack would give a Gillette razor an inferiority complex. The last of the individual elements to construct were the beam rifle and the shield. After that, we could take all the components and put them together and see what this guy looked like fully assembled. Another thing that can add or dock points from the intimidation scale is posture, which is a good life lesson for all of us. Next time you're in a social setting where you want to gain some respect, strike this pose right here. Everyone will think you're so cool. The last thing this mobile suit needs to reach the ultimate level of cool is a stage and some good lighting in which to strike his intimidating pose. So that's what we're going to work on next. For this next step, I took a trip to the thrift store. And speaking of the little silver box on the left, the guy who was ringing me up said, "I don't know what that is or what it does, but I know it's important and I wish I knew how to do stuff with things like that." I said, "Me too, man. I actually have no idea what it is. I just really like this texture here. I'm going to use it for some scale modeling." He said, "Well, everybody's got their thing, I guess." And then he didn't really talk to me after that. The other thing I picked up from the thrift store was this laptop cooling tray. Popped off the little rubber feet so I could get to the screws, and then after unscrewing it, I popped it open, and I kinda wish I hadn't. I'm not sure if this was used to cool a computer, or a cat that was constantly snacking on crackers. Either way, it was a special surprise. But I was actually after this other side that had some nice circle texture to it. The last thing I grabbed from the thrift store were these lights, which I was planning to light up the display with. After opening them up and getting some batteries inside, it was very obvious they were not going to work. Essentially, the only thing that happened was you could change the color of visible white on the puck itself, but it cast almost no light anywhere else. So that's not going to cut it. This find was not a complete bust, however, because the wall mounts that came with the lights ended up being just right to be a stand on which I could put my platform and tilt to any angle. With the situation and materials assessed, it was time to start working. I separated each of these textures and parts so that I could get them into a more usable state. And while I was snipping this metal, I got a little splinter in my palm. For something so small and barely visible, it's amazing how irritating that was. The plastic piece with all the holes on it is going to be a perfect substructure to build the rest of the platform on top of, but not in its current state. First, we have to cut it up. My favorite base that I made for the Gundam Assemble video was the one that the RX-78-2 was standing on top of. So it goes without saying, but the same inspirations that I used for that, I used for this. Maybe partially destroyed space debris is an overdone setting when it comes to dioramas, but there's a reason it's popular. It looks awesome. And it's also fun to build. And it also tells more of a story than just a nice, perfectly calm and undisturbed sci-fi landscape. To go on top of the laptop tray, I found a sheet of styrene with a nice grid pattern on it, and this should create a nice bit of visual interest rather than a perfectly flat surface. When it comes to making the area with the damage, one thing I learned from looking at my favorite pieces and reference photos is that real fake things have layers. So do real things, but I'm not recreating a real thing, I'm recreating a fake thing. To make the fake thing look real, you need to add a decent amount of layers. For the layer that goes under the top styrene piece, I made a large grid out of some square styrene rods, and then I filled in the spaces in between with some plastic canvas. To get the plastic canvas to hold glue, I flame annealed it, which is an excellent pro tip that I got from Craftsman. Without that step, superglue would have almost no grip. The next layer down was made of some beams. These are some thicker styrene beams. I wasn't really sure if the black plastic would hold superglue very well, so I flame annealed that as well. With those beams in place, I could now rough them up using a Dremel, and then glue the upper section of the platform on top of that. When the platform had been glued in place on top of those beams, I now had a nice space between the circle grid and the top that I could fill in with some mechanical guts. I used some offcuts of the circle plastic to create little braces for some pipes. Having things perfectly spaced out and parallel like this goes a long way when making mechanical things like this. Next, I made some broken power cables that I borrowed from that silver box that the thrift store guy and I didn't know the nature of. And the only piece of official Gundam plastic that I used for this base was this grid pattern, which I took from a high-grade hangar bay kit. I removed all the little tabs. I glued that to the underside of the whole thing, and then I snipped it up in a way so as to be consistent with the damage that existed above. One thing I wanted at all the furthest reaching points of this platform was a little bit of a bend. Threw my heat gun in a vise, and I heated up the plastic till it was able to be bent into shape. I repeated the same heating and bending process on the large styrene beams as well. There are a few more details I wanted to add to the platform, but before I did that, I wanted to get the stand figured out and see where we were at. The new lights that I purchased came with this little gorilla pod with a ball joint on the top and a 1/4-inch mount, which was perfect to be able to put right here and change the angle of the platform however I needed to. I wasn't able to get it seated in here as tightly as I wanted to, but I found a plastic offcut with some nice jagged points to it that I used as a washer. After screwing that in place, I sealed the whole thing permanently with a 2-part epoxy glue. Once it's fully cured, it will not go anywhere and it will have no rotation to the left or right, which is what I was trying to prevent. Something that worked out perfectly that I wasn't expecting is that the holes on the bottom of the laptop tray are 1/4 inch, meaning I could thread that onto the ball joint and it fit nice and snug without any other modifications. So that was pretty cool. The next step was to figure out how the Gundam would fit on the platform. My solution was to use a small metal pipe that could couple nicely with the piece that holds up the wing pack. I then mapped out the height and location of the Gundam so it would rest naturally on the platform, like they're both floating in space. I then drilled a hole in the base for the metal pipe, and it came the critical moment in which I had to decide on the orientation of the platform. I thought through the different options that I had, and ultimately I decided to have it sloping down and to the left, or down and to the right from the Gundam's perspective. I don't think there was a right or wrong answer to this. The visual weight looked better or worse depending on how his legs were positioned. So I picked a pose I wanted and matched the angle accordingly. With the base and the angle figured out, it was now time to add the final details to the platform. I wanted more bent and gnarled beams protruding from that broken edge, and a few pieces of styrene grid floating away from the platform as well. Adding large pieces on top of small pieces that you can't see very well is a nice way of adding motion to a piece like this. And finally I broke out that hex grid, which had attracted me to that silver box at the very beginning of all this. I sliced it up and I used it to spice up the sides of the platform, which were pretty much flat and empty up until this point. After adding some guitar strings, which were a gift from a patron, the last detail I decided to add was a large flat piece of styrene over top of the whole thing. This will add one more layer of visual interest and help break up that grid pattern. I don't know why I was counting to space it out like this because it is asymmetrical, but I marked that and cut it off camera, and after that had been glued in place, the building phase was done and it was time to tidy up my workstation and get everything ready for the painting phase. My workspace becomes an absolute disaster every time I do kit bashing like this. It's always so satisfying when it all gets cleaned up nicely. I wanted to keep the nice wooden appearance that was already on the base, so I masked that off. And let's get one more final look at it before we take it outside and paint the whole thing black. After giving that a coat of matte black primer from a rattle can, gave it some time to dry, and I brought back an old hobby mat and some water cups, rinsing pot, and my airbrush. One way to add some nice natural looking variation to a paint job applied over a large, mostly flat area is to give it some imperfect coverage. I varied the level of which I applied the gray, and once that had been applied everywhere it needed to be, I masked off the center section, which I wanted to remain gray. All the flat styrene surfaces with that grid pattern on it got a coat of greenish gray blue. Now, having seen the end result at the end of this, I probably should have gone with a little bit more vibrant colors, because once the floodlights shine on them, the whole thing just kind of looks gray. That being said, without the lights, I think the color scheme looks just fine. Immediately after removing the first layer of masking tape, I reapplied the masking tape to create a line that follows the edge of the flat middle section, and I gave that a coat of warm, desaturated yellow. Another thing I should have done, now that I'm looking back at this, is gone back and added some stenciled letters or something over top. It would have been subtle, but I feel like it would have added a lot. I did add some numbers in the form of a leftover sticker, but it's super tiny and barely visible in the end. From there, I applied a brown wash to give the metal bits a little bit more warmth, followed by a series of smoke and char and weathering concentrated along the broken edge at the bottom. From there, I broke out a brush and added some little spots of color here and there, followed by an enamel pin wash to give the grid pattern a little bit more of a pop. And with that, the painting was done. After peeling off the masking tape, I see that I did not mask very well, and some of the black had made its way onto the wooden base. No worries though, a little bit of lacquer thinner will take that right off. To protect and seal the paint job, I took the whole thing outside and gave it a matte clear coat of enamel. We're reaching the end of this project, and like I said, I wanted to have some nice dramatic lighting bouncing off that silver finish to accentuate what makes this Gundam special. So to do that, I decided to add some 1/4-inch thread directly to the base, and then run some flexible arms to hold the lights from there. After getting those holes drilled, I screwed in my inserts, which I think are made for furniture, and then I screwed in my flexible arms. One issue that I faced with these arms and lights installed was that it made the base very unevenly balanced. So I went back and I put some weight underneath to keep it from tipping over. I'm not sure why I hadn't thought to use these sunlight projector lights more in the past. It's not like I wasn't aware of them, but they aren't expensive and they really cast some nice, impressive, dramatic lighting. I used them in my Ori project a couple weeks ago, and I will certainly be looking for more ways to integrate them going forward. I did a little cable management and tested out my lighting setup. I'm really happy with the way that looks. The last thing to do was to put Mr. Silver Freedom in his position, and after that, I called it good. Before moving on to my final shots, please take a moment to appreciate all of the art challenge submissions sent in by my patrons. The theme of the month was Ancient Creatures, and I think they did a great job. Nice work, and thank you once again to all the patrons who participated last month. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.